Hey everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. I hope those of you who are in the Great White North, as I am, are staying safe and warm. We're well into the negative double digits right now and lots of ice out there. So had a delivery from the UPS guy today who said he'd already fallen twice. So hopefully everyone's staying safe. But that UPS guy delivered boxes and boxes of my new book, but we'll talk about that on another day, because today our very special author guest is Bretton Loney, who is a Halifax author who has independently published two novels, Joe Howe's Ghost and The Last Hockey Player, as well as a biography, Rebel with a Cause, the Doc Nikado story. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Two of his books were nominated for the Whistler Independent Book Awards, in 2018 for his first novel, The Last Hockey Player, and in 2015 for the biography. Loney's stories have appeared in Canadian short story anthologies and literary journals, including the short story collection Everything is So Political. In 2019, The Cooley's Song appeared in the Group of Seven Reimagined, a collection of flash fiction stories inspired by the artist's paintings. He is currently working on a murder mystery set in the founding of Halifax, 1749 to 1751, that he hopes to publish in the fall of 2025. A journalist for more than 20 years in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, Loney also worked in communications for the government of Nova Scotia for 16 years. So lots of background to feed into these amazing books that he's written. So I'm going to bring Brett up to join me and chat about his author journey. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Anne. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Do you
Thanks.
prefer Brett or Bretton?
Brett's fine.
Brett, nice to see you and nice to have you. When I was talking about the latest book, Joe Howe is going to bring this up, but I realized I had to push a button, right? Those wonderful Kindles. I prefer to have a hard copy book in my hand, but when all else fails, what's your preference?
Oh, hard copy, absolutely.
For sure, and the stacks just get bigger and bigger.
They do.
But they're great for traveling and, great for last minute. So welcome to the author journey. So good to have you.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And I didn't realize that you were working on a mystery, so have to touch on that a little bit after. So we have some common ground to share. So let's dive into this Joe Howe's Ghost. And I love the cover. Who designed that cover for you?
A guy named Ivan from London, but originally from Italy. But just I've worked with him on a couple of books, and I just love what he does. And I'll say, this is my vision of it. And he says, no, I think we do
This will work better.
This will work better, and he's always right.
Wow. Okay. And because that was black and white, I'm going to add this there so you can get a better vision of what this cover looks like. And it really does explain things quite well. So what was it that made you want to write about the ghost of a Nova Scotia, very, very famous Nova Scotia politician?
Well, so I've had the idea for a long time before I actually started to try to write it. I
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated by Joe Howe. I'm embarrassed to say that as someone with a degree in political science from Alberta, I had literally never heard of Joe Howe before I moved to Nova Scotia when I was
Okay.
24.
Mm-hmm.
So fascinated. As someone who's been involved in the outskirts of the political world and as a journalist for almost my entire career,
Mm-hmm.
he was just such an amazing combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating man, a wonderful public speaker, a larger than life person,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
I
he
just
started out as a newsman.
and he started out as a
Mm-hmm.
newsman and worked his way into being a publisher, and then worked his way into being a politician. And he's just such a fascinating character. He lives such an amazing life that that slowly, as I started into the world of fiction, I just
Mm-hmm.
thought I got to write a book about Joe Howe, but I didn't really have a clear concept of what I would do until I sort of said to myself, Well, he's got to tell a story to someone. Well, how's he going to tell a story to someone? It should be someone today because it makes
Mhm.
it more relevant to what goes on. And then I thought, well, it should be a young female politician. And then her character kind of evolved out of that conversation because
Mhm.
it allowed us to compare compare and contrast the differences and similarities between the two eras. And I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of similarities. It's just the nature of it that's changed a bit. But so I needed a way to, I really wanted a way to connect it with a modern audience. And I was really desperately hoping that I could connect it with younger Nova Scotians because I think Nova Scotians over about the age of 55 learned about it at school.
Mhm.
Learned about
Oh,
Joe.
yes.
Anyone under that age has learned almost virtually nothing about him. They drive
Mhm.
along Joe Howe Drive, or they drive by the Joe Howe building downtown, or drive by the statue and go, "Yeah, it's that guy again." I got,
Right. Some
and
old guy. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm quite shocked by that, and have been kind of astounded by it. But so
Mhm.
I thought the ghost thing would give us a way into telling his story and then talking about politics now, as well
Mhm.
as the politics of his time and journalism of his time and journalism now.
I mean, it's brilliant, and the cover is very eye catching. It draws you in. And you talked a little bit. Just want to give a shout out to the folks who are watching. Thanks, guys, for tuning in today. And if you have questions for Brett or I, please feel free to jump into the comments. Jane Doucette has popped in and says hi, Anne and Brett. Hi, Jane. Thanks for watching and listening. So I want to go back to you talked about how important it is to educate and inform the generations that are coming up. And I grew up in Halifax, so Joe Howe was very familiar to me. There were parades and things, but I didn't know the full story. So I found the reading Joe Howe's Ghost very fascinating, and I thought that the approach that you took, instead of writing historical fiction, writing it in present day, was brilliant. And our province does have quite a history of ghost sightings.
Yeah.
So, it has Joe Howe's ghost been seen in the halls of?
No,
No,
not that I'm
not that you
aware of.
know of.
Not that
Okay.
I'm aware of. But I mean, there were people that would buy it just because it had the word ghost in it.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
love that.
there were people that bought it just because of that, and
Yeah.
so, I mean, I guess I was kind of using a genre. I call it paranormal political fiction, um,
I love that.
so I mean,
PBF.
I don't know if it had enough of that for people that were really into that side of things, but it was a device I was using, and yeah, it's great to hear that you thought it worked.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very clever. And, I like that sort of the mashup. And I remember when I wrote my first book, it was a crime fiction. And certain one of the underlying themes was menopause, and someone called it a meno mystery. But I like paranormal political fiction, I think.
Yeah.
And we have another shout out. Mark Shoup is watching, and I think Mark is watching us from Vietnam,
Oh wow.
if I remember correctly. He says, I can
Yeah.
attest to the people over 55. I remember vividly a grade 6 trip to Province House to learn about Joe.
Oh, there you
I
go.
I just love
Yeah.
that. So I had a question. Well, I have many questions for you, but as you were talking about, the decisions you made when you sat down to write this book to appeal to a younger, broader audience, you chose a female protagonist. Talk a little bit about that and why that was important to you.
Well, so, for a few reasons. I mean, I thought it would make it even more likely to connect with a more modern audience.
Mm,
There's a lot of unique situations and challenges that face female politicians. I was thinking recently over my time in government, I probably worked with about 12 or 14 cabinet ministers, many of them women, for all three
mhm,
political parties. So I got a chance to see how politics tended to work, at least from my sort of stepped back situation, for women and for men, and it worked differently. The women
mhm,
had a much tougher gig, and had to put up with, quite frankly, bullshit that men would not have to put up with, and both internally and externally.
mhm,
And so it was an intriguing idea for me, and frankly, that character at first was kind of a character so that we could tell Joe's story. But the more I sort of thought about it and evolved it, and my meta readers, I think it's called, or beta readers, or
Beta readers, yeah.
meta beta readers,
Alpha
uh,
beta.
are my wife and my kids. And my kids are about roughly the age of that character, of
Mhm,
the female MLA, and they just sort of said, "Nah, Dad, you gotta go further with this." And so, I thought it more. The character evolved more, and
mhm.
so it was just important to me because uh, people will say, "Oh yeah, well, women in politics, it's everywhere," and they kind of, yeah, but not premier, not
Mhm.
prime minister for more than 2 cups of coffee,
I thought
so
about Kim Campbell.
yeah, so like not near as far as people think it's come.
Mhm,
So it was an important theme that I wanted to explore for sure.
mhm. And so you said that, Joe Howe was a fascinating character for you from, way back when you first moved here. When was it that you first moved to Halifax?
I first moved here in 1984 to go to University of King's College with
Oh, excellent.
that at the time included a young man named Mark Shoup.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
that did you do journalism there?
I did. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I did the 1 year program there. Yeah.
Okay. And Jane says, Brett knows I love his dry sense of humor. He's incredibly quick with a quip. I keep asking him to write a humor novel, and he keeps saying no, but he has teased that there's a funny character in the next novel.
I have.
So, do you want to talk about that particular book, or are
Yeah,
you
I,
keeping
I,
that under?
well, I can a bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm working with a very good editor named Marianne Ward. You might have heard of her. Um, uh,
Vaguely.
yeah, and yeah, so it's a murder mystery. I would say it's a murder mystery with a romantic element to it. But it's set
Awesome.
in Halifax between 1749 and 1751. So literally the
Okay.
founding of Halifax. But I think what I can bring to it is to that idea is that I'm really now, even Joe Howe's Ghost, not historical fiction per se, and yet historical fiction. So
Big
it's an area,
historical element.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, it's a real interest of mine. But when Atlantic Canadians or Nova Scotians write about the founding of their communities, they write about it in a little bit different way than someone raised out west who
Mhm.
literally was 2 generations removed from pioneers, whose
Mhm.
grandparents or great grandparents had been pioneers. And so there's just a little bit different way of writing about it. It's a little less immediate,
Mhm.
because the history here is so rich and so long. I mean, from the early 1600s.
Mhm.
Halifax is a newcomer at 1749.
Mhm.
I thought I could bring that kind of element to it. I mean, I really wanted to capture it's a thing, like there was nothing here. They had nothing. There's not a store. There's not a dock. There's not a, you know what I mean? So I really
Mhm.
wanted to capture that. And a shout out to John Tatry, whose book on Cornwallis. There was a line in it where he sort of
Mhm.
says, "Look, one of the first things the English surveyors did is they cut the original streets downtown. They cut the street first, and then they cleared out space to
Wow.
put the house. So, like Duke
Wow.
Street was cut through woods. It had a
Right.
sign that said Duke Street. There's nothing else there. And when I heard that, I just went, "Oh wow, that's
And that's smart. You like the infrastructure before, the people. What a
entirely."
concept.
What a concept. But I mean, like, just the image of it, I just went, "Oh, wow." Like, that's just like, and so
I
that
love that.
kind of got me thinking about, well, what am I going to do in this 1749 to 1751? I
Mhm.
don't want it to be a flat out straightforward historical
Mhm.
fiction. So then I added the murder mystery element, and then a romantic element sort of came out of that. So yeah, so that's my next project. And so quite hopefully, uh, uh, my efforts and my editors good willing, God willing, hopefully about this fall.
Oh, excellent. Well, Marianne edited my next book coming out, which is a mystery. So the mystery element's becoming a expertise of
Yeah,
hers, which is
yeah.
which is great.
Well, she's also the editor of Joe Howe's Ghost. So
Yes. Oh, excellent. Well, it is extremely, like I said, brilliant. I loved the Just the interaction. I love that nobody else can see him. Um, what were some of the things? So let's go back to Joe Howe's Ghost. Very nice segue.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you think would be most surprising to readers?
For a modern audience, and again, like it seems like it's self-evident to people of a certain age, but not to a more modern
Mhm,
audience. The whole libel trial thing, the
mhm.
fact that he represented himself at the libel trial,
Yep.
the fact of what libel actually was in that time, which is a
Mhm,
slightly different thing than it is today,
mhm.
and very onerous to try to get to be found
Clear your name.
to clear
Yeah.
your name entirely.
Yeah.
That he fought a duel in Point Pleasant Park.
I loved that part.
Yeah,
That was really good.
that he fought against Confederation. We just don't think of we think of Joe. Well, that traditional politician. Blah blah blah. He must have supported Canada. No, at first he
Mhm.
did not,
Mhm,
and
and
then
alienated a lot of the loyalists here
yeah,
who, were very loyal to the crown and, didn't want
yeah,
to
no,
yeah.
entirely.
Mhm,
Yeah, and then crossed over to the other side. I mean, so became part of one of Sir John A. Macdonald's first cabinets, and then
mhm.
he went to uh, the Red River Colony just before the Riel Rebellion. Blew my mind because, like, for me, it's my sort of historical heritage of the West, meeting
Mhm,
the historical heritage I've learned in Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia. So I just
mhm.
went, "Oh, this is just great." I mean, maybe I think it's greater than other people do, but I mean, I was just, so I mean, he just is, I mean, he went to Queen Victoria's coronation. Like uh, so there was just so many things about him. And I didn't get into lots of pieces. Like I had to kind of shunt aside, I mean, some of the various things that had done in his political career because it
Mhm,
was so vast. So I had
mhm.
to really sort of focus and then, try to explain responsible government in a couple of pages. Like, like they're not easy concepts, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, and also I like the comparison that are drawing between then and now, and, so much changes that doesn't change,
yeah,
and the challenges. And for this young MLA, Aaron, who goes to him for advice and says, "Oh my goodness, what would you do in this situation?"
yeah,
And I'm being forced to, to sign for funding for
yeah,
something I don't believe in and
yeah.
shouldn't, and so have things changed for the better? Like, and are we, sliding back?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things I hope I was able to tease out of it on the political side about things that are the same is, like, frankly, as someone who had been a journalist looking at politics from totally the outside, and then
Mhm,
someone in communications, not part of the direct political thing, but seeing the implications and the fallout and seeing it
mhm,
pretty close at hand,
mhm,
is that internal politics is actually what drives political parties. Like you
mhm,
think that they come to these decisions because of external politics, of them wanting votes of whatever. And I'm not saying that's not part of it, but I think people would be shocked,
mhm,
gobsmacked, amazed, astounded at how many times it's the politics within the party or
mhm,
within the cabinet um, that shape decisions. And that's as much in Joe Howe's time
mhm.
as today.
As now, I
And,
mean, the
and
external happens, as elections are looming, right?
yeah,
Not,
but when
mhm,
you don't, when you can't understand a decision a party made, sometimes you think it's about the external, and I've come to realize, no, it's about the
mm,
internal. It's
mhm,
entirely about the internal, but it's just not something that, I mean, only so many people would know.
yeah.
So I mean, so that's something I very much wanted to talk about. Um, yeah,
And you mentioned, like, being on the inside, as a, communications director or professional, in government entities, and something that's happening right now in the Nova Scotia government is Communications Nova Scotia is going away. So, how are they going to get information out? Like, now it's gonna
yeah. I
become
mean,
decentralized again.
yeah. I mean, they'll get information out, but it's just unfortunate because it was a little more. It was third party. It brought a certain rigor. It brought a
Hmm.
certain lens to the
Balance.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Balance, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a time that is increasingly partisan, and all the parties are increasingly partisan, both in
Mm-hmm.
Canada and the United States and around the world. And so, when they can have greater control, they want to have it. And
Yeah.
so, I think this is just an example of a trend that we're seeing all across the country, and particular with our friends in the South, and all around the world. And it's not a good trend; it's just a trend. But I mean, these things, I guess, go in cycles. Hopefully,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's hope,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we talk, you talk about, Joe Howe's big, legacy, the responsible government, the defending free speech, and, just the whole, what is, free speech, and how is our government supposed to operate, and, the media being such an important, element of a democracy. So seeing a lot of those changes happening must be unsettling for like somebody like you who was a journalist for 20 years.
yeah. No, it certainly is, and sadly, so I mean, that's the other thing that I guess maybe a difference is that Joe Howe, because he came from that culture of journalism,
Mm,
always respected journalists. They didn't have to agree with them. He didn't have to like what they wrote, but
mhm,
he kind of realized, look, they got a job. I understand what that job is. It's an important job. I don't have to like what they did today or the next day, but that doesn't mean I don't like the person, or that I
mhm,
don't respect what he or she did. Well, in his day, it would have been he.
mhm,
But they respected the role, and quite frankly, and keep in mind, the 16 years I worked in government, there were three political parties that
mhm,
formed government. So I saw three political parties, different political parties in action,
mhm,
and I didn't find that the political class, and by the political class I mean the elected politicians, and more importantly their aides, were necessarily all that democratic.
mm,
And I would make the distinction between being democratic and being partisan. And they were unable to put aside their partisan thing to sort of go,
mm.
yeah, media, you have this job to do. I don't like what you wrote today, but that doesn't mean your job isn't important or critical. And they
Right.
didn't seem to be able to understand that they were also always consumers of that information.
Mhm,
So they couldn't separate being a consumer of information from being a partisan. So when it was against them, their partisan hackles were up, but when it
mhm.
was something that they needed to know, then it was fine. And you kind of go, well, that's not really how it works.
Right, and you're
I mean,
slammed both
yeah,
ways.
it wasn't a particularly sophisticated view, and frankly, you've not heard a great outcry among politicians about the shrinking traditional media. They think it's swell.
Mm,
Um, but what they don't realize is they used the traditional media an awful lot to communicate to people through something that looked neutral, or
mhm.
largely neutral. Well, now they'll be using
Right,
solely social media that is entirely unneutral, and
right.
and so or unneutral, yeah, unneutral. So
Mhm. Biased.
so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, where
Mhm.
people suspect of bias, right?
Right, right,
So it's that they didn't even quite get what was happening, and they didn't care about it because they're worried about today's battle, not about tomorrow's battle,
right.
or about tomorrow's battle that has nothing to do with politics, but is a development plan for their local neighborhood that they live in. You know what I mean? So it's they couldn't see the bigger picture. They're just worried about today. Well, we got a bad review, we got a bad column, we got when they where's that thing such thing as columns in the
Right.
uh, we
Mhm,
got a bad story today.
mhm.
Now we hate all media and we hate
I've
all
been
journalism. Well,
misquoted. Yeah,
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 misquoted,
yeah.
misinterpreted,
Mm.
misunderstood. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Anyway,
right.
yeah.
So we have tons of comments. Sue Slade has joined us. Hi, Sue. I enjoyed Joe Howe's Ghost. Um, Marianne Ward's joined us. Hi, Marianne. And a fun subgenre for sure. And Mark says, love Joe Howe's Ghost. New book sounds great. Look forward to it. Wonder if you have read Hangman's Beach.
I have read some of Hangman's Beach.
And Sue says she loves books set locally. Let me tell you, we have such um, great fodder, like in our history.
Oh,
Such colorful characters.
yes,
They say
entirely.
real life is,
Yeah.
sometimes stranger than fiction. So we have a lot to draw from. Oh, Sue said after reading Joe Howe's Ghost, she went to visit his gravesite. I think
Oh,
that's fantastic. And
yeah.
this might be a good time to take a little pause and have you read a little excerpt before we run out of time. We could just chat away. So
Oh,
I'm
we
going
could.
to hand the mic over to you
Okay.
and let you
Yeah, so I'm just going to read.
take it away.
I'm going to read from the opening chapter 1 of Joe Howe's Ghost. Um, and here we go. The second time I saw him, I felt him first. Every hair tingled. The taste of metal coated my tongue. The speaker piping in the drone of late-night debate from my fellow MLAs fell silent. I was alone in the legislative library, and it was still as a tomb. At the top of the winding wrought iron staircase to the second floor bookstacks was a shape. To the left of a portrait of the Duke of Kent. No more than a shadow in a room cloaked in semi-darkness. I shook my head. After a sleepless night pacing the floor with a sick toddler in my arms, I was too exhausted to be at work. In the gloom, a hand formed grasping the railing so tightly a row of knuckles popped up. An elderly man took shape out of the nothingness. He had a large head, a wild crown of white hair, and a turnip-shaped nose. He wore a long dark frock coat with a white high-collared shirt, a vest, and a bow tie. His left hand was hooked on the lapel of the frock coat, his feet anchored as though steadying himself on a rocking ship. He gazed down on me from under winged eyebrows. "Good evening, madame," he said formally, his voice hoarse and dusty as though unused for a long time. 8 porcelain busts mounted along the walls turned their heads toward him ever so slightly. The freakish movement was startling, winded me like a punch to the stomach. I blurted out, "Good evening," as my head fell to the table and the world went black.
Ooh. I love that. And you know what I love is that he appears in the first page. Like that is, I think, a smart move. I think that, it establishes really both of them, Aaron, the MLA, and Joe, as sort of equal
Yeah.
characters in the storytelling.
So funny thing about that scene is this summer I took my wife and I took our grandkids, 16 and 8 or 15 and 7 at the time,
Hmm.
to see the legislature, and we're in the library, and I said, "Yeah, this is where Pop's opening scene of his book is from," and the librarian overheard and says, "Oh, you're the fellow." Yeah, we have it in here, he said.
Oh, that's amazing.
I also know from the member of one party that a member of another party in late night debate one night was actually seen reading it on the floor of the house too.
I love that. And so how does that make you feel? Because I
Oh,
mean, there are some
great.
parts that, oh, that is amazing. Like you don't pull any punches,
No.
right? I
And it was
mean,
interesting. I had one liberal MLA who's actually no longer an MLA. She decided not to re-offer. Said, "Yeah, that's written about me," and it wasn't written about her. But you know what I mean. It was nice that and I probably know of 3 or 4 female MLAs from all 3 parties actually that have bought the book, which I love that.
I bet
Uh,
it's amazing.
yeah, I mean, so anyway, it was just
I
fun.
was gonna I was gonna ask you if there was somebody in particular who inspired Aaron, the character in the book, or was she amalgamation? But that it sounds like you've answered that question.
Yeah, she was pretty well an amalgamation, and
Mhm,
and really all the characters of the modern world in it were all amalgamations, and none of the incidents or the situations that evolve are specific in situations. What
mhm.
what I can say is they all could have. They all easily
Right,
could have. That's
right.
what I was aiming for authenticity
Yeah.
of a logical development, but not something that had actually happened.
Right. So I imagine there also some of the um, the situations and the gravy projects may have been sort of inspired by some of the stuff that you had covered
Certainly
in your
inspired.
years.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I have run into politicos who say, "Yeah, I know who that character is," and I kind of go, "Well, maybe you think you do, but
right.
I don't know that
Yeah.
you do." But yeah, yeah, I had one young guy said, "Yeah, I think I know who that one is," and I didn't, not going there.
No, and there are certain stereotypes,
Yeah,
and tropes, if you will,
yes, exactly.
in this genre.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, I mean, you all, I wonder, like, if there are any like descendants of Joe Howe that are still around.
That's interesting because even in the last few days of the Joe Howe days, there's never anyone trotted out. Um,
Right.
and yet, so I mean, like, there's lots of the old names that came up because they were, colleagues or friends of Joe Howe's, and some of those names have disappeared.
Mm,
But ironically, in the new book that I'm writing about 1749 to 1751, some of those names you go, my God, that name. They own an insurance company. That that name's a hockey player name. This one's, you know what I mean? Like a
right.
surprisingly large amount of names. I just go, that's
Wow.
crazy.
Maybe
Yes.
Gordie Howe.
No, no,
No.
there's no relation apparently.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I'm drawing. I'm,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
clutching. Well, I can't believe we're out of time. We didn't even get to talk about your other books. But where can people find your books? I'm going to bring up your
Uh,
website again.
Yeah, so BrettonLoney.com will give you some information
Mhm.
about Joe Howe's Ghost, not about the other ones, but
Mhm.
on Amazon, Joe Howe's Ghost is available. The Last Hockey Player, that's a dystopian novel set in Nova Scotia, is on there. And then the third book I self-published is actually no longer available other than through your favorite author here.
Okay.
It was a Rebel Without a Cause, the Doc Nakado story, written about a Japanese Canadian doctor in my home community whose family was lost everything they owned on the BC West Coast during the war years.
Oh boy.
And so it's all about how his life was shaped by that, including the fact that he never paid taxes for the rest of his life to the federal government that had wronged his family. And so he literally worked off of trading you to I'll fix you if you fix my car, and lived like
Wow.
that for 25 years because he wasn't paying a dime back to the federal government in taxes that had done what they had done to his family. They lost their business, their car, their house, and their savings.
So I misunderstood. I thought that was their, apology to him to not have him pay taxes, but that was his.
That was his. I ain't paying. Like, yeah, it was, yeah. uh, Fascinating man,
Wow,
but
wow.
he lived like a old school friar. Like, I mean,
Trade.
off trade.
Wow. And what was the title of that book again?
A rebel with a cause, the Doc
Rebel with
Nakado
a.
story. Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody wants to read about that, you'll have to reach out to Brett on his website. We'll bring that up once more. Visit him at brettonloney.com, learn about all of his books. And I do know that Joe Howe's Ghost is also available at the Dartmouth Book Exchange. So I got to slide that in. Hopefully Sue's still watching. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. Everybody says they enjoyed the conversation. And they're all looking forward to your next book. So
Well, great.
chop chop.
Yeah, and Anne, thank you very much. It was a great conversation and a pleasure to be part of this.
Totally my pleasure. And let us know when that book comes out and we'll have you back.
That sounds great. Thanks, Anne.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
And thank you so much for joining us on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell, and we're going to be rolling along with more author interviews and industry expert interviews as we progress every week on Tuesday afternoon on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing, and I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day and stay warm and watch that ice out there. Bye for now.